The crystal glasses clinked as laughter echoed through the private room of the Royal Pine Country Club. 5 of the city's wealthiest men sat around a mahogany table, their faces flushed from expensive whiskey and their own amusement. Among them sat Alexander Chen, known to most as just Chen, a 35-year-old tech genius whose latest app had just pushed his net worth past $11 billion. The night had started like any other Friday gathering. Talks of stock markets, new ventures, and their latest luxury purchases. But as the evening wore on and inhibitions lowered, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "You know what your problem is, Chen," said Richard, a silver-haired investment banker, swirling his drink thoughtfully. "You live in a bubble. All those women you date, they're all the same. Models, actresses, socialites. It's like you're collecting designer handbags rather than building real connections." Chen raised an eyebrow, his fingers tapping against his glass. The others leaned in, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" he asked, his voice carrying that slight edge that had made him famous in boardroom negotiations. "A challenge," Richard replied, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Something to shake up your perfect little world." "I'm listening." Chen's interest was piqued. He built his empire on taking calculated risks, on seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles. "Marry someone completely different from your usual type. Someone who wouldn't normally move in our circles. Someone who'd make headlines. Say, a woman from a modest background, preferably African American. Stay married for 1 year." Richard paused for effect. "Unless, of course, you're afraid of stepping out of your comfort zone." The room grew quiet. Even the ice seemed to stop clinking in their glasses. Chen's expression remained unreadable, but his mind was already racing with possibilities. "And what's at stake?" he asked, his voice cool and measured. "50 million, Richard said without hesitation. "You succeed, I pay. You fail, you pay. But here's the catch, she can't know about the bet. It has to look genuine." "Make it 100, Chen countered, surprising everyone. "And I want it in writing." The other men exchanged glances, their earlier playful mood replaced by something more serious. They all knew Chen well enough to recognize when he'd set his mind on something. "You're actually considering this?" asked David, the youngest of the group. "It's crazy even for you." Chen stood up, straightening his custom-made suit. "Crazy is what built my empire, but let's be clear. This isn't just about money. You think I live in a bubble? Fine, I'll burst it. And I'll do it my way." What Chen didn't say was how the challenge had struck a deeper chord. His own parents had started with nothing, immigrants who worked day and night to give him an education. Somewhere along his journey to the top, he'd forgotten those roots, surrounded himself with people who measured worth only in dollar signs. The next morning, the contract was drawn up, witnesses signed, and the stage was set. Chen's team began their research, creating a profile of potential candidates who fit the criteria. But he had one non-negotiable requirement. Whoever she was, she had to be exceptional in her own right. This might have started as a bet, but he refused to make it a mere transaction. As his investigators compiled dossiers, one name caught his attention. Olivia Washington, 32, a dedicated teacher who'd turned down corporate jobs to work in inner-city schools. She'd started a successful after-school program that helped underprivileged kids get into college, funded largely through her own efforts and community support. Looking at her photograph, a candid shot of her laughing with her students, Chen felt something he hadn't expected, genuine curiosity. Her eyes held a warmth that all the polished socialites he dated seemed to lack. Her achievements, though not measured in millions, spoke of a different kind of wealth. He began planning their accidental meeting, but for the first time in years, he felt uncertain. This woman wasn't someone who could be impressed by fancy cars or expensive restaurants. She would see through such obvious displays of wealth. No, this would require something he hadn't done in a long time, being real. Chen scheduled a visit to her school's fundraising event, making sure his presence would seem natural, just another potential donor interested in education. What he didn't expect was how seeing her in person would affect him. As she passionately explained her vision for expanding the program to more schools, he found himself forgetting about the bet entirely. The game had begun, but already the rules were changing. Chen had entered into this thinking he would be the one teaching someone about his world. He didn't realize that he was about to become the student, learning lessons that no amount of money could buy. The school gymnasium buzzed with activity as volunteers set up tables for the annual fundraising event. Olivia moved between the stations, making sure everything was perfect. Her students had worked too hard for anything to go wrong tonight. Their science projects, art displays, and presentation boards showcased months of dedication, telling stories of dreams bigger than their circumstances. She paused to straighten a student's presentation board about renewable energy, smiling at the careful handwriting and detailed diagrams. These kids had so much potential, all they needed was a chance to prove it. "That's quite impressive work," a voice said behind her. Olivia turned to find a man in a perfectly tailored suit studying the display. Something about him seemed familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. "It is," she agreed proudly. "Michael, one of my 8th graders, built this solar panel from recycled materials he collected around the neighborhood. The whole project cost less than $50. Chen listened, genuinely impressed. He'd expected to find a typical fundraiser with rehearsed speeches and token displays. Instead, he saw real innovation born from necessity and determination. "I'm Chen," he introduced himself simply, intentionally leaving out his last name and any mention of his company. "I heard about your program from a friend in the education sector." Olivia's eyes lit up at the mention of the program, and before Chen knew it, he was being led on a tour of the gymnasium. Each stop revealed another layer of what she'd built here, not just an after-school program, but a community where kids could dream beyond their zip code. "Our biggest challenge is space," she explained, gesturing to the cramped corners where students huddled over shared laptops. "We've grown from 15 students to over 100 in 2 years, but our resources haven't kept up." Ken found himself asking questions not because of the bet, but because he was genuinely curious. How did she manage to get such impressive results with such limited resources? What made these kids stay after school instead of hanging out with friends? As they talked, he noticed how Olivia's whole demeanor changed when discussing her students. Her voice grew animated, her hands moved expressively, and her eyes sparkled with passion. It was so different from the practiced charm he was used to in his social circle. The evening progressed, and Chen found himself volunteering to help when one of the presentation stands nearly collapsed. As they worked together to stabilize it, their hands brushed briefly. The simple contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, a feeling that had nothing to do with his calculated plan. "You're different from our usual donors," Olivia remarked later as they shared paper cups of punch near the refreshment table. "Most of them come in, write a check, take a photo, and leave. You actually seem interested in the kids." Chen felt a twinge of guilt at her words. He had come here with ulterior motives, but somewhere between the student projects and their conversations, something had shifted. "These kids remind me of myself," he admitted, sharing a truth he hadn't planned to reveal. "My parents worked in a factory. Education changed everything for me." Olivia studied him with new interest. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Now I'm in a position to help change things for others. If you're willing, I'd like to discuss how I could support your program more substantially. Over dinner, perhaps." The words slipped out before he could analyze them, and for the first time in years, Chen felt nervous about a dinner invitation. Olivia hesitated, and he could see her weighing the proposition. "I should warn you," she said finally, a small smile playing at her lips, "I'm not impressed by fancy restaurants. There's a small Ethiopian place around the corner that serves the best food in the city." Chen felt his carefully constructed plan shifting, adapting to something more real. "That sounds perfect," he said, meaning it. As they exchanged numbers and agreed on a time, neither of them noticed Richard's associate watching from across the room, documenting their interaction for proof of the bet's progress. The following week, Chen found himself sitting in a cozy restaurant with mismatched chairs and family photos on the walls. The owner greeted Olivia like a long-lost daughter, and soon their table was filled with shared plates of fragrant stews and injera bread. Watching Olivia teach him how to eat with his hands, laughing at his clumsy attempts, Chen realized he was experiencing something he hadn't felt in years: genuine joy. The bet that had brought him here seemed increasingly insignificant compared to the warmth of her smile and the way she challenged his perspectives with her thoughtful insights. But as their evening drew to a close, The weight of his deception hung heavy in his chest. Every genuine moment between them was shadowed by the knowledge of how their meeting had really come about. Chen told himself it didn't matter, that the end would justify the means. Yet watching Olivia talk about trust and authenticity, he wondered if he was about to lose something far more valuable than $100 million. The autumn leaves danced around them as Chen and Olivia walked through the city park, their hands intertwined. 3 months had passed since their first meeting, and Chen could hardly remember what life was like before her. Their weekly Ethiopian dinner dates had turned into daily phone calls, surprise lunch visits to her school, and long walks where they talked about everything and nothing. "My grandmother would love you," Olivia said, breaking their comfortable silence. "She always says you can tell a person's character by how they handle things they can't control." She laughed, watching Chen try to dodge another falling leaf. "Like autumn winds." Ken pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her coconut hair oil. "Tell me more about your grandmother," he said, genuinely curious about the woman who had helped shape Olivia into who she was. Olivia's eyes lit up, the way they always did when she talked about family. "She's quite a story. Did you know she comes from a royal lineage in West Africa? Her great-grandfather was a king who believed education was more valuable than gold. He sent all his children to study abroad, even his daughters, which was unheard of at that time." Chen stopped walking, surprised. "Royal lineage." "Oh, not the kind you're thinking of," Olivia chuckled. "We're talking about a different kind of wealth. My grandmother says her family had vast lands, precious artifacts, ancient scrolls, but they chose to donate most of it to museums and educational institutions. They believed wealth should serve a purpose beyond just sitting in a vault." Something shifted in Chen's chest. Here he was, playing a game involving millions of dollars, while Olivia came from a family that had willingly given up their fortune for a greater purpose. "That's why I became a teacher," Olivia continued, unaware of his internal struggle. "My grandmother taught me that true wealth isn't about what you have, but what you give. Every time one of my students succeeds, I feel like the richest person alive." Ken thought about his own definition of wealth, about the hollow victories he'd celebrated in boardrooms, about the bet that now felt like a weight around his neck. "Your grandmother sounds wise," he said softly. "You should meet her," Olivia suggested, her voice hopeful. "She's visiting next week for the Harvest Festival at our community center. It's nothing fancy, just home-cooked food, traditional dances, stories from the elders. But it's real, you know." Real. The word echoed in Chen's mind. Everything about Olivia was real, her laugh, her passion, her principles. And here he was, his feelings for her growing stronger each day, while their relationship had started with a lie. The festival turned out to be everything Olivia had promised and more. The community center was transformed with colorful fabrics, the air filled with the aroma of traditional dishes and the sound of drums. Chen watched in awe as Olivia's grandmother, a regal woman with silver locks and bright eyes, held court among the children, telling stories that had been passed down through generations. "So, you're the one who's stolen my granddaughter's heart," she said when Olivia finally introduced them. Her penetrating gaze seemed to see right through him. "Grandma," Olivia protested, but her grandmother just smiled. "Come, help me serve the rice," she told Chen, leaving no room for refusal. In the kitchen, away from Olivia, she spoke again. "You carry a heavy burden, young man. Whatever it is, remember this. Love built on lies is like a house built on sand. The tide always comes." Chen felt the blood drain from his face. "I don't know what you mean," he stammered. The old woman's eyes softened. "Yes, you do. I see how you look at her, that's not pretense. But I also see the shadow behind your eyes. Fix it before it's too late." Before Chen could respond, Olivia bounced into the kitchen, wrapping her arms around both of them. "My two favorite people. Are you sharing embarrassing stories about me?" "Just wisdom," her grandmother said, winking at Chen. "Everyone needs a little wisdom now and then." That night, as they drove home, Olivia fell asleep against Chen's shoulder. Looking at her peaceful face, he made a decision. Tomorrow, he would tell Richard the bet was off. He'd pay the $100 million, plus whatever penalty they wanted to add. Olivia's love was worth more than any amount of money. But fate had other plans. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Congratulations on the progress. The board is impressed. Just 6 more months to go. Don't mess it up now." Chen turned off his phone, feeling sick. 6 months had passed already. Looking at Olivia again, he realized with startling clarity that he wasn't just falling in love with her, he had already fallen hard and completely. The bet that had brought them together now threatened to tear them apart. As if sensing his turmoil, Olivia stirred in her sleep, murmuring his name with a smile. Chen held her closer, making a silent promise. Somehow, he would find a way to make this right. He had to. Because a life without Olivia, he now understood, would be no life at all. The annual Tech Innovation Gala sparkled with its usual excess: crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and the who's who of the business world dressed in their finest. Chen adjusted his bow tie nervously, watching Olivia charm a group of potential donors for her education program. She looked stunning in a royal blue gown that her grandmother had helped design, combining traditional African prints with modern styling. "Your wife is quite the natural," Richard commented, appearing at Chen's side with 2 glasses of champagne. "Who would have thought a simple teacher could fit so well into our world? The board is impressed. Looks like you'll win that bet easily." Chen's stomach churned at the mention of the bet. "Not now, Richard," he muttered, taking a quick sip of champagne. "Oh, come on. It's been what, 7 months? You're almost there. Though I must say, you're playing your part remarkably well. The way you look at her, anyone would think you're actually in love." "I said not now." Chen's voice carried a warning edge, but Richard was too amused to notice. "Remember when you first agreed to this? We all thought you'd pick some random person, throw money at them until they agreed to marry you. Instead, you found someone with actual substance. Brilliant strategy. Makes the whole thing much more believable." Unknown to both men, Olivia had stepped away from her group, heading toward the quiet alcove behind them to take a break from the crowd. She froze mid-step as Richard's words reached her ears. "The best part is," Richard continued, "she has no idea this whole thing started as $100 million bet. The look on her face when she finds out that her perfect love story began as a business transaction, now that would be something to see." The sound of breaking glass cut through the air. Chen spun around to find Olivia standing there, champagne spreading across the marble floor from her shattered glass, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. "Olivia." Chen stepped toward her, but she backed away, her hands raised as if to shield herself from his words. "Is it true?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through him like a knife. Was this all just a bet?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Around them, the gala continued, music playing, people laughing, completely unaware of the world crumbling in their little corner. "I can explain," Chen started, but Olivia's bitter laugh stopped him cold. "Explain what? How you calculated every move. How you chose the poor black teacher as your perfect opposite. How you probably laughed with your rich friends about how easily I fell for it all. No, it's not like that. Yes, it started as a bet, but everything changed. What I feel for you is real." "Real?" Olivia's voice cracked. "My grandmother was right about the shadow in your eyes. I just never thought. I never imagined." She pressed a hand to her stomach, and Chen noticed for the first time how pale she looked. "Are you okay?" Concern overrode everything else as he reached for her, but she stepped back again. "No, I'm not okay. I'm pregnant." The words fell between them like bombs. "I found out this morning. I was waiting for the perfect moment to tell you. I thought this would be a night we'd always remember." Chen felt the world tilt on its axis. "Pregnant? We're going to have a baby." "No," Olivia said quietly, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I'm going to have a baby. You're going to win your bet." Before he could stop her, she turned and walked away, her back straight, her head high, every inch her grandmother's granddaughter. Chen tried to follow, but the crowd seemed to close in around him, voices calling his name, hands reaching out to congratulate him on his company's latest success. By the time he made it to the entrance, she was gone. His calls went straight to voicemail. When he rushed to their apartment, he found her side of the closet empty and a single envelope on their bed. With trembling hands, he opened it. "My grandmother taught me that real love is built on truth. The funny thing is, I thought we had that. Every smile, every touch, every late-night conversation, it all felt so genuine. But now I understand that while I was building a life, you were playing a game." I won't be your $100 million prize. Keep your bet money. I'd rather have nothing and be honest than have everything built on lies. Don't try to find me. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. My baby deserves better than to be the result of a wager. Goodbye, Chen. Olivia. Chen sank to the floor, the letter crumpling in his fist. The clock on the wall struck midnight, and somewhere in the city, Olivia was alone, carrying his child, believing their entire relationship had been a lie. His phone buzzed. A message from Richard, dramatic exit. But don't worry, only 5 more months to go. The money's practically yours. Chen held the phone against the wall, watching it shatter like his perfectly planned life. He had succeeded in his bet to marry someone completely different from his usual type. But in the process, he had lost something far more precious, true love, and now, a family he never knew he wanted. 2 months of searching had led Chen to a small village outside Accra, Ghana. The humid air clung to his skin as he walked down a dirt path lined with flowering trees, following the directions he'd received from locals. His designer shoes, once pristine, were now covered in red dust. He barely noticed. The past months had changed him. After Olivia left, he'd thrown himself into finding her, but every lead turned cold. Her phone was disconnected, her social media deleted, and her resignation from the school had been handled through a lawyer. Even her students, loyal to their beloved teacher, refused to tell him anything. It was her grandmother's words that finally gave him hope. Love built on lies is like a house built on sand. The answer had to be here, in her family's homeland, where that wisdom was born. An elderly woman sat in a wooden chair on a wide veranda, wearing a vibrant yellow dress and head wrap. She didn't look surprised to see him. "I wondered when you would come," Olivia's grandmother said, her voice carrying the same quiet strength he remembered from the harvest festival. "Please," Chen's voice cracked. "I need to find her." "Sit." She gestured to a chair beside her. "First, you need to understand." As Chen sat, she poured him a cup of hibiscus tea from a weathered pot. "Look around you," she said. "What do you see?" Chen glanced at the modest house, the garden full of vegetables and herbs, the children playing in the distance. "A simple life," he answered honestly. "Ah," she smiled. "That's where you are still blind. This land you're sitting on once belonged to kings. My great-grandfather's palace stood right here. The British offered him millions to buy our artifacts, our sacred items. You know what he did? He donated everything to museums and universities. Then he used the palace grounds to build schools." She sipped her tea, watching Chen's expression. People called him crazy. They said he was throwing away his children's inheritance. But he understood something you're just beginning to learn. Real wealth isn't in what you keep, it's in what you give away. The education program, Chen realized. Olivia wasn't just teaching. She was carrying on her family's legacy. "Now you're seeing." The old woman's eyes twinkled. "When you made that bet, you thought you were choosing someone beneath you. The truth is, my granddaughter comes from a line of people who had everything and chose purpose over prosperity. What can your millions offer that compares to that?" Shame washed over Chen. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't. But that's not why she left." The grandmother leaned forward. "She left because you didn't trust her enough to be honest. Love without trust is like a bird without wings. It will never soar." "I love her," Chen whispered. "The bet stopped mattering long ago. I was going to call it off, pay the money, tell her everything. But I waited too long." "Yes, you did." Her voice was gentle but firm. "And now she carries your child, believing their whole existence began as a game." Chen's head snapped up. "You know where she is?" "I do. But before I tell you, you need to prove you've learned something. Not to me, to them." She pointed to a group of children gathering near the old school building. "They need new classrooms, books, computers. Their families can barely afford uniforms. Show me you understand what real wealth means." For the first time in weeks, Chen felt purpose flood through him. He spent the next week at the school, learning every need, meeting every family. He called his company, redirecting funds from their luxury office renovation to establish a permanent education fund. He worked alongside local builders to start classroom renovations, his expensive clothes replaced by work clothes, his manicured hands covered in calluses. The grandmother watched it all, saying nothing until the final evening. As they sat on the veranda again, she handed him a piece of paper. She's in Cape Coast, running a program for young mothers to continue their education while raising their children. She's helping them write their own stories, just as she's writing hers. Chen held the paper like it was gold. Thank you. But why help me now? Because you finally understand what she tried to teach you all along. Real wealth, true love, they're not about what you can get, but what you can give. She stood, adjusting her wrap. She's due in 4 months. The baby kicks strongest in the morning when she walks by the ocean. Chen felt tears slide down his cheeks. I don't deserve another chance. Probably not, the grandmother agreed with a small smile. But love isn't about deserving, it's about choosing. Choosing to be honest, choosing to be better, choosing each other every day. The question is, what will you choose now? As Chen walked back down the dirt path, his heart lighter than it had been in months, he realized something. He had come to Ghana looking for Olivia, but he had found something else too, the man he wanted to be, the father he hoped to become, and an understanding of wealth that no amount of money could buy. The morning sun painted Cape Coast in shades of gold as Chen walked along the beach, his heart pounding with each step. For 3 days, he'd walked this same path, hoping to catch a glimpse of Olivia during her morning walks. Today, he finally saw her. She stood at the water's edge, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching the waves dance against the shore. The wind played with her loose dress, and even from a distance, she looked more beautiful than he remembered. More peaceful too, as if these months away had given her something she couldn't find in their previous life. Chen approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She sensed his presence before he spoke, turning with a grace that took his breath away. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to pause. Your grandmother said I might find you here, he said softly, staying a respectful distance away. I thought she might tell you. Olivia's voice carried no anger, just a quiet acceptance. She believes everyone deserves a chance to write their own ending. I don't deserve anything from you, Chen admitted, but I needed you to know the truth, all of it. Olivia gestured to a nearby bench overlooking the ocean. As they sat, Chen noticed how she unconsciously protected her belly, and his heart ached with love for both her and their unborn child. While you were gone, he began, I learned about your family's legacy. About the palace that became a school, about the treasures your great-grandfather gave away to build something more valuable than gold. So now you know I'm not just a poor teacher you picked for a bet, Olivia said, but there was no bitterness in her voice. No, Chen shook his head. Now I know I'm the poor one. I had everything backwards. I thought wealth was about what you could get, not what you could give. I thought success meant winning, even if it meant lying to someone you love. He pulled out his phone, showing her photos of the school renovation in her grandmother's village. These past weeks, I've been learning what real wealth looks like. It looks like children getting an education. It looks like communities coming together. It looks like, he glanced at her belly, like the chance to be a father, if you'll let me. Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she swiped through the photos. The old classrooms, you fixed them. Your grandmother made me work for it, Chen smiled, showing her his calloused hands. No shortcuts, no just throwing money at the problem. I learned every family's story, helped build every wall. The education fund is set up to help not just that school, but to expand your program across West Africa. And the bet? Olivia asked quietly. I paid it. All 100 million, plus penalties for breaking the contract early. Richard was furious, but it didn't matter. Nothing matters except making this right with you. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves. You know what hurt the most? She finally said. Not the bet itself, but thinking that every moment we shared was calculated. Every laugh, every kiss, every time you listened to me talk about my students. I thought it was all fake. None of it was fake. Chen's voice cracked. The bet brought me to you, but love made me stay. Real love, the kind that changed everything I thought I knew about wealth and worth and success. A small smile tugged at Olivia's lips. My grandmother says you've changed. I'm trying to, Chen admitted. Every day, I'm trying to be the man you and our baby deserve. Not because of a bet, but because loving you taught me what really matters. Olivia shifted on the bench, one hand moving to her back for support. Chen instinctively reached out to help her, then caught himself. But this time she didn't pull away. The baby kicks hardest in the morning, she said softly. Maybe because that's when I talk about you. Chen's heart skipped. You talk about me. I tell the baby about their father. About his brilliant mind that created tech that helps millions. About his laugh that makes his eyes crinkle at the corners. About how he might have started with a mistake, but he's learning to write a better story. Tears rolled down Chen's cheeks as Olivia took his hand and placed it on her belly. Under his palm, he felt a strong kick. That's not forgiveness, Olivia said clearly. That's just a new chapter. If we write it together, it has to be with complete honesty. No more bets, no more games. Just us, building something real. Just us, Chen agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Building a legacy of love and truth for our child. As the sun climbed higher, they sat together on that bench, talking about everything, their fears, their hopes, their dreams for their baby. Chen shared stories about his time in the village, and Olivia told him about the young mothers she was helping. With each word, each shared smile, they began carefully rebuilding what had been broken, but this time on a foundation of truth. The waves kept rolling in, witnesses to a love story that had started with a bet but was transforming into something far more valuable, a legacy that would ripple out through generations, touching lives far beyond their own. 1 year later, the Royal Pine Country Club buzzed with a different kind of energy. Instead of the usual business talks and deal-making, the grand hall echoed with children's laughter and traditional African music. The space had been transformed with a blend of elegant modern decor and vibrant African prints, celebrating the launch of the Global Education Bridge Foundation. Chen stood at the podium, looking nothing like the man who had made that life-changing bet in this very room. His eyes were warmer, his smile genuine as he addressed the crowd of educators, students, and business leaders. A year ago, I thought I knew everything about wealth, he began, his voice carrying across the hushed room. I made a bet that changed my life, but not in the way I expected. It taught me that true riches aren't measured in bank accounts, but in the lives we touch and the legacy we build. In the front row, Olivia sat with their twin daughters, 6 months old and already showing their mother's bright eyes and their father's curious expression. Next to them, their great-grandmother watched with quiet pride, her traditional head wrap a splash of joyful color against the formal setting. Today, we're not just launching a foundation, Chen continued. We're continuing a legacy that began generations ago when a wise king chose to transform his palace into a school. That same spirit of choosing purpose over prosperity guides us now. The screen behind him lit up with images, the renovated school in Ghana, new computer labs in inner-city schools, young mothers graduating while holding their babies, students from different backgrounds sharing stories and dreams. The Global Education Bridge Foundation isn't just about building schools or providing resources, Olivia added, joining Chen at the podium. It's about building bridges between communities, between generations, between different ways of understanding wealth and worth. She adjusted one of the twins in her arms, smiling as the baby reached for the microphone. Every child deserves the chance to write their own story. Every parent deserves the opportunity to build a better future for their family. That's not charity, that's justice. The crowd erupted in applause as Richard, of all people, stood up. I think I speak for everyone here when I say we've all learned something about true wealth from you both. Consider me the first donor to your new foundation. Chen looked at his former betting partner with surprise. That's unexpected. Let's call it interest on an old bet, Richard winked. One that you technically lost but actually won in every way that matters. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Chen found Olivia's grandmother sitting in the club's garden, watching the sunset. The twins were asleep in their carrier nearby, tiny hands clasped together. A year ago, you told me love built on lies was like a house built on sand, he said, sitting beside her. You were right. And now? She asked, her wise eyes twinkling. Now we're building something different, something solid. Chen watched as Olivia approached, carrying 2 sleepy babies, something that will last beyond us. That's what legacy means, the grandmother nodded. Not what you leave in a bank account, but what you plant in hearts and minds. Your love story began with a bet, yes, but it grew into something much bigger than yourselves. Olivia joined them, passing one of the twins to Chen. The students from my old school asked about you today, she told him. They said you're nothing like what they expected a billionaire to be. Chen laughed, gently rocking their daughter. What did they expect? Someone focused on making money, not making a difference, she smiled. I told them about how you worked alongside the builders in Ghana, how you learned every student's name, how you believe that education is the greatest investment anyone can make. The grandmother stood, adjusting her wrap. You see, the bet was just the beginning. The real story is what you chose to do after, how you chose love over pride, truth over pretense, giving over getting. As if on cue, both twins woke up, reaching for each other across their parents' arms. Chen and Olivia brought them together, watching as their tiny hands found each other again. They always need to be touching, Olivia observed. The doctors say it's because they shared everything before they were born. They don't know how to be separate. Like love and truth, the grandmother said softly. Like wealth and purpose, like your two worlds coming together to create something beautiful. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, a reminder of that beach in Cape Coast where they had begun again. Chen looked at his family, his brilliant wife who had taught him the true meaning of wealth, his daughters who represented hope for the future, and the wise grandmother who had helped him find his way. You know what's funny, he said, watching the twins drift back to sleep. A year ago, I thought I was taking a risk with that bet. But the real risk would have been never learning what I know now. That love is the greatest wealth, truth is the strongest foundation, and family is the most precious legacy we can build. Olivia squeezed his hand, their matching wedding rings catching the last rays of sunlight. And to think, it all started with a bet. No, Chen corrected gently, it all started with love. The bet just helped me find my way to it. As night fell over the country club, the little family stayed in the garden, surrounded by the sweet scent of flowers and the quiet wisdom of generations. Their story had come full circle, but in many ways it was just beginning. For every student who would receive an education through their foundation, for every life touched by their shared vision, for every bridge built between different worlds, their love story would continue, growing richer with each passing day.